Something I really hate is when people make a list of their top 10 before the new movie comes out. I like waiting, seeing the new movie, and then deciding where that goes on my list, and now we can talk about it. Hey everybody, this is David, and today I'm going to be telling you my top 10 Star Trek films. There are 13 Star Trek films, but this is only going to be a top 10 because I believe top 10s are the traditional way of doing these lists. I mean, people can do it whatever way they want. 13 is not a big number. I could have added 3 more to this list if I wanted to, but I like being traditional, you know? So here we go. We're going to talk about my top 10 Star Trek films in the order. I should mention that I am not the biggest Trekkie in the world. I didn't watch all the TV shows. The only one that I really watched was The Next Generation. And before, I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 episodes of the original, maybe 1 episode from Voyager and 1 episode from Deep Space Nine, and maybe 1 episode of the prequel series, Enterprise. I just couldn't get into those ones like The Next Generation. I really love that cast and those characters. So, and my mom was huge on The Next Generation as well, so I kind of watched it because she watched it. And with that being said, let's get through this. What are the top 10 Star Trek films? At number 10, I have Star Trek Nemesis. This might not be the best one for a lot of fans, and this is actually the one that bombed badly in theaters, that it ended the franchise for a couple of years. But I look at it, and I actually enjoyed it. I look at it as a nice little finale for the Next Generation crew. And that was the rumors anyway, so they kind of had their their Wrath of Khan moment, where in Wrath of Khan, spoiler alert, Spock dies. They kind of had that in this movie. I'm not going to reveal which character dies, because I think not a lot of people probably saw this film, since it did the least. But I do think it's worth checking out, especially if you are a Star Trek The Next Generation fan. It's also nice to note that Tom Hardy, that's right, Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, he's also been in great films like Inception and The Revenant. He is the main villain in this movie. I'm not going to reveal what he plays, but it's an interesting little twist midway. Number 9, I have Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. This one is kind of like, this was the start of that, you know, people saying that the odd numbers are the not so great ones and the even numbers are the better Star Trek films. Well, that tradition clearly ended with Star Trek Nemesis, which was the 10th film, an even number. Star Trek 3, on the other hand, if that is true, I think Star Trek 3 is the best of the weakest films. And as you can see from its story, it's interesting because Leonard Nimoy directed this one. And I think he did a really good job with the story he was trying to tell. There were a lot of great emotional moments with Kirk and Spock and McCoy. And, well, Spock kind of plays a smaller, more interesting role. Because this takes place after Wrath of Khan, where, spoiler alert, Spock dies. And in this one, he somehow comes back to life because of this planet that Kirk and crew sent his body on. And I think I'll leave it at that for now. Christopher Lloyd plays the villain, and even though I can so see Christopher Lloyd when he speaks his lines, it is interesting to have an actor of that caliber as a Klingon. Number 8 on my list, I have Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. This is the one with the whales, everybody, and this is probably the most comedic Star Trek film to date, where they go back in time and they need to go get some whales from the 21st or the 20th century in 1986, the year the movie was released in. It's a really interesting movie for non-Trekkies, I think, to check out, because it's very different from the typical Star Trek adventures, I guess they say. And a lot of people say the time travel movies, you know, are some of the best ones. Are they all for me? We'll find out. Number 7, I have Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. This is a really good one. I think, from my understanding, it was very relatable to the time that it was released in, which was 1991. But I will say I really did like the story and how it kind of concluded the original cast's storyline, especially with Kirk, with his anger over the Klingons who, killed his son in Star Trek 3. Spoiler alert. And also, you got another great actor playing a villain in this movie, Christopher Plummer, a fellow Canadian. At number 6, I have Star Trek Generations. This was the first Star Trek The Next Generations movie, and I actually enjoy this one a lot. I know it doesn't get the love that a lot of people should give it, I think, because, you got Captain Kirk and Captain Picard teaming up. I'm not even a huge fan of the original series, but even I get wow, that's actually pretty cool, man. The original captain teaming up with the next generation captain. You don't get that every day. And so to me, it was actually, I think they're the two best captains ever, Kirk and Picard. So it was really a joy to see these two share the screen together. Even though it's the last maybe 40 minutes of the film, it was still really enjoyable. And it was a nice little way to pass the torch from the original crew to the next generation. At number 5, I have Star Trek Beyond. This is the newest Star Trek film in the franchise, and I'm actually surprised that it didn't get higher than this. I had to really think about it, and when I really did, I'd say, yeah, it was a really good Star Trek film. Unfortunately, not as good as I wanted it to be, but it was still really enjoyable, and I totally recommend it to people. Please, go check this movie out in theaters. This is the kind of movie that deserves to be seen in theaters. At number 4, I have Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. This one is probably going to get me killed by Trekkies because Trekkies hold this one in very high regard. And I get it. I understand it. It's a really great, well-made film. But for me, there are a couple of cheesy moments. The part where Kirk yells, "Khan!" When I heard other fans talk about that line, I don't know if they're making fun of it or think it's one of the most genius acting performances ever. I love William Shatner, but that line of dialogue is cringeworthy for me. But I will admit it is a great adventure movie, and definitely the strongest movie with the original cast. At number 3, I have Star Trek First Contact. This is my favorite film of the Next Generation cast. Definitely another time travel movie, I should add. And yeah, it's definitely different from Star Trek Generations, which was the first film. And another interesting thing to note, it is directed by Jonathan Frakes, who plays Commander Riker in the Star Trek The Next Generation film, TV show and films. And it was really well directed. I really loved how they had to go back in time and stop this thing from happening. And the Borg, I think, are interesting villains. They're like zombies in space. So if you love zombies, I think you might like this movie. Just saying. It's also a really nice personal film for Picard because he's dealing with some issues that happen in the TV show. Now, you don't have to watch the TV show to understand the movie. They give you enough information to understand who the Borg is and what their history is with Picard. Number 2, I have Star Trek Into Darkness. This was the second film that featured the new cast that's currently out in theaters right now, Star Trek Beyond. And yeah, I gotta say, I really enjoyed this movie. And this was before I knew who Benedict Cumberbatch was, because I got onto the Sherlock train a little bit late in the game. I got into it after this movie came out because, the Hobbit movies were also out. And I'm like, whoa, a show with Bilbo Baggins and Khan? Okay, I'll check it out. So it was this movie that got me into Benedict Cumberbatch. I thought he played a really good Khan. I understand the complaints a lot of people made that the original Khan was played by a Latino and this one is played by a more white British guy. But come on, you gotta admit, Benedict Cumberbatch is such a great actor, and he plays evil so well, and he plays good so well too. But that's why I think he was perfect for this role. I think he was just a great actor in general, and you want a great actor to play Khan, one of the greatest Star Trek villains of all time. And the cast is great in this movie. The entire cast is great. Finally, number one. That's right. This is the only Star Trek film I gave a 10 out of 10 to, and it is the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek film that came out in 2009. I love this movie. This movie is definitely the movie that got me hooked into Star Trek, that made me a fan of this film universe. This is the movie that made me go back and watch the older films and appreciated them a little bit more, especially with Leonard Nimoy back in this role as this iconic character, Spock. I love the cast in this movie, from Chris Pine to Zoe Saldana to Simon Pegg and so many others. It's such a great film, and funny enough, it involves time travel again. But time travel in a different way. Unlike the previous two films, Star Trek The Voyage Home and Star Trek First Contact, where you see the crew going back in time, trying to stop something from changing, something does change in this movie because it involves the crew's perspective, seeing someone come to their time, which is kind of unique, and it kind of paved the way for other movies to try that out, such as X-Men Days of Future Past and Terminator Genesis. Obviously, some movies did it good, some movies did it bad. But this movie was the one I like to think that tried doing a reboot, but in a way where it can try to make everybody happy, where it acknowledges the past did happen, but we're going to erase it with you guys knowing. And it was such a great move on, the studio's part and J.J. Abrams to take this approach. I thought it worked really well, and the new cast, as I said, was great, perfectly cast in their roles. They embodied everything the original cast did and elevated it to the next level. So guys, with that being said, I hope you like this video. I hope you agree with me. Tell me, what are some of your lists of the Star Trek films? List them in the order from 1 to 10, or 13 if you want to add all 13 of them. And my least favorite Star Trek film, if you want to know, is Star Trek Insurrection. It feels like a direct-to-video. So yeah. So I like The Final Frontier. And that's saying something for you Trekkies out there. I know you all hate The Final Frontier. I think Final Frontier is more enjoyable than Insurrection, because at least it felt like a movie, if you want to call it that too. So subscribe to my channel, like this video, and check out my podcast. Check out me on Facebook and of course Twitter. All of that will be in the description box below. And until next time, guys, live long and prosper.